The boy stole his father's jacket and ignited it, finding amusement as the flames consumed it. What these youths failed to comprehend was the significance that patch represented. The journeys, the good deeds, the individuals Big Roy Miller had defended when everyone else turned away. When dawn arrived, motorcycles were already heading toward the town. Certain motorcycle clubs require no invitation, and certain obligations remain unforgotten. Jake Miller had mastered the skill of becoming invisible. Though not in a physical sense, there were moments when he wished for actual invisibility. He'd become proficient at moving through corridors while avoiding others' gazes, occupying rear classroom seats where instructors overlooked his presence, and consuming his midday meal in the book repository where inquiries were non-existent. At merely 11 years of age, he'd already transformed into a specter. 13 months had passed since his father's passing. The physician attributed it to a cardiac issue. Everyone who was acquainted with Roy Miller called him Big Roy. He collapsed in a mechanical workspace one Tuesday at sunrise. His wrench remained gripped in his palm. There were no advance indications, no farewell moments. He simply ceased to exist. Following that event, educational activities became mere ambient sound. Jake's mother labored through consecutive shifts at the medical facility. She arrived home depleted, preparing quick meals in silence. His academic performance declined from satisfactory to poor marks. Educators employed terminology like emotionally disturbed and requiring assistance in electronic correspondence his mother lacked time to review. Jake ceased to concern himself with their labels. The residents felt incorrect now, excessively silent. His father's mechanical implements remained suspended in the workspace, undisturbed. His footwear rested near the entrance. Occasionally, Jake would pass Roy's mechanical area and detect the aroma of engine lubricant and hide, and momentarily he'd experience forgetfulness. Subsequently, he'd recall reality and breathing would become difficult. One Thursday in the afternoon, during his mother's rest period before her nocturnal shift, Jake ventured into the upper storage area. His search had no particular objective, merely something that didn't feel hollow. He discovered containers of previous financial documents, seasonal ornaments, a dairy container filled with outdated recording tapes. Subsequently, concealed in the corner under protective covering, he located the aged storage chest. The hide jacket within possessed greater weight than anticipated. The aged brown hide showed creases from extended travel periods, carrying scents of fuel and particles, and something unidentifiable yet instantly familiar: his father's essence. The rear displayed the Iron Vulture's emblem, a winged creature sewn with faded threading. Near the collar, written in his father's careless penmanship, appeared a message for Jake: when you're prepared to travel your personal path. Jake held it against his torso and inhaled deliberately. The pain persisted, yet it no longer occupied his entire chest cavity. He wore it the following day to school. Entering the educational facility, felt transformed. The jacket draped loosely across his frame, with excessively long sleeves, yet he remained indifferent. Students gazed. Several gestured. One female student inquired about its authenticity. Jake maintained his downward gaze and offered no response, as was his custom. The midday meal period arrived. Jake proceeded toward the book repository, but discovered the entrance secured. Some gathering was occurring. He reversed direction toward the dining hall, subsequently cutting through the lateral exit adjacent to the athletic facility. That's when he detected their voices. Interesting costume choice, Miller. Patrick Holt remarked while positioned against a masonry barrier with folded arms, accompanied by two additional eighth-grade students. Patrick embodied everything Jake wasn't: elevated stature, vociferous, self-assured. His father operated Holt Development Corporation, financed half the educational institution's initiatives, and presided over the parent-teacher organization. Patrick wore costly athletic footwear and communicated as though repercussions were irrelevant for individuals of his status. Jake attempted to proceed past them. Patrick positioned himself as an obstruction. I posed a question to you. Where did you acquire the motorcycle enthusiast costume? A seasonal costume establishment. It belonged to my father. Jake responded softly. Ah, correct. The intoxicated individual associated with the motorcycle collective. It's a club organization. And he wasn't intoxicated. Certainly. My father claims those individuals are merely lawbreakers with motorcycles. Failures pretending to possess courage. Patrick extended his hand and flicked the patch. This is refuse. Jake's hands formed tight fists, yet he remained motionless. Patrick displayed a smile, retrieved from his pocket a metallic ignition device. Let's observe how resilient it truly is. One of the accompanying boys provided Patrick with a small container. Ignition fluid, presumably stolen from someone's father's mechanical workspace. Jake's cardiac rhythm accelerated. He desired to flee, desired to vocalize loudly, desired to strike Patrick's arrogant facial features, yet his lower limbs refused movement. Patrick sprayed the jacket once, then twice. The chemical odor irritated Jake's nasal passages. Remove it, Patrick instructed, unless you desire to ignite alongside it. Jake's digits trembled as he removed the jacket from his body. Patrick seized it, cast it upon the ground surface, and activated the ignition device. The flames ignited immediately. Orange and azure flames consumed the hide, destroying the patch, the threading, the words his father had inscribed. Jake observed without blinking. His hands experienced tremors. The laughter seemed more intense than the combustion. They departed while exchanging celebratory gestures, as though they'd achieved something valuable rather than destroyed it. When the combustion ceased, Jake knelt downward, collected what remained, scorched, malodorous, damaged beyond wearability. He folded it with care, positioned it beneath his arm, and traveled homeward through secondary streets where observation was unlikely. That evening, he withheld information from his mother, merely positioned the burned jacket upon his sleeping surface and observed it until the chamber became dark. Subsequently, he mounted his bicycle and traveled to the sole location that retained meaning anymore. The truck stop dining establishment off Route 9, where the Iron Vultures continued to assemble every Thursday evening. The dining establishment carried aromas of coffee and diesel combustion fuel. Jake entered through the transparent door shortly after 8 o'clock, still grasping the burned jacket. The establishment was partially vacant. A truck operator at the counter surface, a food server refilling salt containers, and in the rear corner seating area, the Iron Vultures, .6 of them were present that evening. Eric Owens occupied the primary position at the table, metallic-colored beard precisely groomed, vision correction spectacles positioned on his nasal bridge as he examined a geographical chart. Blaze occupied the opposite position, with decorated arms folded, a scar extending down his left facial cheek from a collision in 2003. The remaining individuals Jake recognized but didn't know intimately: Tiny, Grizz, Spider, and a younger individual named Crow, who'd only been officially inducted the previous year. Eric directed his attention upward first. His vision moved from Jake's facial features to the bundle beneath his arm, and something altered in his facial expression. He didn't vocalize anything, merely folded the geographical chart, removed his spectacles, and indicated the vacant seat adjacent to him. Jake moved into the seating area and positioned the jacket upon the table surface. The chamber became silent. Even the truck operator at the counter surface rotated to observe. Blaze extended his hand deliberately, drew the jacket toward himself, and rotated it. The rear patch was scarcely identifiable. Carbonized edges, liquefied threading, the vulture's wings diminished to dark smears. He located the collar area and squinted at the faded inscription still observable beneath the carbon residue. Who performed this action? Blaze's vocalization was tranquil, excessively tranquil. Jake communicated everything: the athletic facility, Patrick Holt, the ignition fluid, how he merely remained stationary and observed the combustion. When he concluded, nobody vocalized for an extended moment. Eric massaged his jaw region. Greg Holt's offspring. Jake nodded affirmatively. Predictable, Tiny muttered. That individual has attempted to terminate our operations for years. Identifies us as a public disturbance every occasion we travel through the town. Blaze positioned the jacket downward gently, as though it possessed sacred properties. This isn't regarding hide material, he stated quietly. This concerns heritage. This concerns Roy. Eric retrieved his communication device, didn't request permission, merely contacted Tommy. Affirmative, it's Eric. Listen, I require you to disseminate information. Roy Miller's offspring just experienced his paternal figure's jacket being combusted by some affluent youth. Affirmative, Roy. Big Roy. I comprehend, brother. That's my point. Saturday morning, we're traveling. Transmit the information onward. He disconnected, contacted again. Mitch, you possess a moment? Excellent. Remember that journey Roy executed back in 2009? The occasion where he extracted your prospect's female sibling from that unfortunate circumstance? Correct? Well, his offspring just experienced disrespect in a manner that cannot be overlooked. Saturday, bring whoever desires to participate. Communications accumulated more rapidly than Jake could monitor. Identities, locations, commitments, all articulated with silent certainty. Within 60 minutes, Jake occupied that seating area observing mature men. Men with decades of road experience behind them. Men who'd witnessed things Jake couldn't conceptualize, making commitments on behalf of a youth they scarcely knew because of a man they'd never disregard. Spider positioned himself forward. Youth, you ever receive information about the journey your paternal figure executed to Helena? Jake moved his head negatively. The club organization had this young prospect member, perhaps 19 years. His female sibling was trapped in an unfavorable relationship up in Montana. The boyfriend was becoming physically aggressive. Law enforcement wasn't providing assistance. The prospect desired to retrieve her independently, but he was inexperienced, didn't comprehend how to manage it. Your father received information about it at an assembly, didn't request authorization, merely mounted his motorcycle at midnight and traveled for 100 miles in a thunderstorm. Arrived at her residential unit with his jacket displayed. Communicated to the boyfriend If he ever contacted her again, he'd need to respond to more than local law enforcement. Transported her back independently. Required 2 days. The club organization was angered. Blaze added, violating protocol in that manner. But every alternative club organization that received information about it respected him for it. Roy never waited for authorization. If something required execution, he was already traveling. Eric's communication device produced a vibrating sound. Then again, text communications arriving. Iron Hawks are participating, he stated while reading. Colorado Springs chapter transporting 12 motorcycles. Renegades from Kansas confirmed. Devil's Backbone from Wyoming. They're inquiring if we require them. Crow directed attention upward from his personal communication device. Leader, I just received information from an acquaintance in New Mexico. Information spreading rapidly. By midnight, commitments continued arriving. Jake occupied that position, depleted and confused, observing men he didn't know pledging to travel for him because of something his father executed years previously, something Jake was only now beginning to comprehend. Around 2 o'clock in the morning hours, Eric's communication device produced a ringing sound one additional time. He responded, listened, and his eyebrows elevated. You're certain? No, I'm not questioning it. I'm merely affirmative. Affirmative will be prepared. He disconnected, directed attention toward Blaze. Angels are participating. The table became silent. Hell's Angels. Tiny whispered. 3 of them, from respect. Eric rotated toward Jake. Your father once assisted one of their members in an unfortunate circumstance. They don't disregard things of that nature, and they don't travel for merely anybody. Jake didn't know what to vocalize, didn't comprehend what any of this signified. He merely knew that something had been initiated, something more substantial than himself, more substantial than a combusted jacket. Blaze stood upward and positioned a hand on Jake's shoulder region. Proceed homeward. Obtain some rest. Tomorrow morning, you're going to require a jacket. We'll manage it. Eric smiled, depleted yet genuine. Your paternal figure left detailed notations about everything, including that jacket. We'll correct it. You merely be prepared at 7 o'clock in the morning. Jake traveled homeward as the atmosphere transformed gray, his lower limbs burning from depletion. But when he collapsed into his sleeping surface, he didn't experience isolation anymore. Somewhere in distant locations, engines were initiating, roads were being strategized, and over 200 riders were heading his direction. All of it for youth most of them had never encountered because of a man none of them had ever disregarded. Jake awakened to a sound he'd only experienced in previous recordings. The deep synchronized rumbling of motorcycles, dozens of them. He rotated from his sleeping surface, moved unsteadily to the window opening, and drew back the covering fabric. His street had disappeared beneath chrome and hide materials. Motorcycles lined both sides of the roadway as far as vision permitted. Harley motorcycles, Indian motorcycles, custom constructions with exhaust components gleaming in the early illumination. Men and women stood adjacent to their machines, some consuming coffee from insulated containers, others inspecting tire pressure or adjusting mirror components. Patches from club organizations he'd never received information about covered their rear surfaces. Iron Hawks, Devil's Backbone, Road Reapers, the Renegades, and there, positioned directly in front of his residence, 3 motorcycles with the unmistakable death head insignia. His mother stood in the doorway opening, hand covering her oral cavity, tears streaming down her facial features. "Jake," she whispered, "your father would be—" She couldn't conclude, merely drew him into an embrace that lasted more extensively than any since the funeral ceremony. At precisely 7 o'clock, Eric knocked on the door. He transported a hide jacket, not new, but immaculately restored. The Iron Vulture's patch had been manually stitched by someone who comprehended the craft. Every detail recreated with precision. Within the collar area, the identical words, "When you're prepared to travel your personal path." But now on the opposite side, a new line had been incorporated: "Roy Big Dog Miller, always traveling ahead." Your father's road designation, Eric stated as Jake inserted it on. "Thought you should transport it with you." The jacket fit more appropriately than the original. Someone had tailored it specifically for his dimensions. Jake directed attention downward at the patch, moved his digits over the stitching, and experienced something unlock in his chest cavity. Eric positioned a hand on his shoulder region. "Prepared?" Jake nodded affirmatively. They walked outward together. The moment Jake appeared, engines roared to operational status. Not aggressively, but ceremonially. A barrier of sound that rattled window structures 3 residential blocks distant. Neighbors emerged onto porches. A woman across the street recorded on her communication device. An elderly man wearing a faded Vietnam veteran cap stood at attention position and saluted. Blaze approached on a matte black Road King motorcycle, a second helmet in his hand. "You're traveling with me. Stay proximate. Don't execute anything foolish. And when we arrive there, you walk as though you possess ownership of the location." Comprehended, Jake climbed aboard. The seat vibrated beneath him as Blaze activated the engine. Around them, the convoy organized itself. Seasoned riders who'd executed this 1,000 times, falling into formation without a single vocalized word. The Hells Angels assumed point position. The Iron Vultures flanked Jake directly. Everyone else filled in behind, 2 by 2, stretching back beyond what Jake could observe. They departed around 7 o'clock. The route to the educational facility normally required 8 minutes by automotive vehicle. The convoy required 20 minutes, moving deliberately through every major intersection, stopping traffic, commanding attention. Individuals stepped out of coffee establishments to observe. Construction crew members stopped laboring. Someone's automotive vehicle alarm was activated from the vibration, and nobody bothered to silence it. Jake's middle educational institution occupied a corner property, observable from 2 streets. By the time they arrived, students had already assembled at the window openings. Teachers stood frozen in doorway openings. The principal, Mr. Davidson, walked outward to the front steps, communication device already pressed to his ear region. The motorcycles filled the drop-off lane, the visitor parking area, the street. They aligned with military precision, engines idling in perfect synchronization. Blaze cut his engine. Silence felt like a covering fabric. Jake climbed off. Eric appeared adjacent to him, Blaze on the alternative side. 3 Hells Angels stood behind them, arms crossed, vocalizing nothing. Their presence alone constituted a statement. They walked Jake to the front entrance. Every step felt amplified. Youths pressed against window openings. A teacher dropped her coffee container. Jake spotted Patrick across the main hallway, frozen near his storage locker, facial features drained of color. Their vision met for half a second. Patrick directed his attention away first. Jake kept walking, didn't stop. He permitted the jacket to communicate. The men behind him didn't need to vocalize WY third period. The recording had gone viral. Someone's mother had filmed the convoy from her automotive vehicle and posted it with the caption, "Over 200 motorcycle enthusiasts escorting bullied youth to educational facility after his deceased father's jacket was combusted." It reached 50,000 views in 2 hours. Local news media acquired it by the midday meal period. Jake was in algebra when the intercom produced a crackling sound. "Jake Miller, please report to the principal's office." The chamber became silent. Everyone gazed, but this time it felt transformed that he walked through vacant hallways, past trophy display cases and bulletin surfaces, and pushed open the office door. Inside, Mr. Davidson occupied the position behind his desk, appearing depleted. Across from him, in a tailored suit that presumably cost more than Jake's mother earned in a month, occupied Greg Holt. "Jake, occupy a seat," Mr. Davidson stated carefully. Greg didn't wait. "Let's cut through this situation. My offspring made an error. Youths push boundaries. It occurs. But this circus you've created, transporting a gang to educational institution property, disrupting the entire district, is unacceptable. You require suspension at minimum for inciting. There's video documentation." Mr. Davidson interrupted quietly. Greg's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, of a jacket combustion. A student filmed it. It's been transmitted to the district office, the educational board, and apparently half the internet." He rotated his computer screen. "It's on the local news right now." Jake observed Greg's facial features shift from confidence to confusion to something that resembled panic. The news segment displayed the burned jacket, interviews with veterans in the community, a statement from the Iron Vultures about Roy's service. The anchor employed words like disgraceful and bullying crisis. Greg's communication device buzzed. Then again. He glanced at it, and his expression became cold. "This is being blown out of proportion," he stated tightly. "My attorney will—" "Your board seat was withdrawn this morning," Mr. Davidson stated. "The mayor's office contacted an hour ago. They're distancing themselves from the situation. The superintendent desires Patrick removed from campus for the safety of all students." Safety? He's the victim here. He's being targeted by "Your offspring set another student's property on fire, Mr. Holt, on educational grounds while mocking his deceased father." Mr. Davidson's vocalization stayed level, but something sharp lived underneath it. "Jake will not be disciplined. Patrick will be transferred. That's final." Greg stood so rapidly his chair scraped. He gestured at Jake. "This isn't over." But his communication device kept buzzing. When Greg Holt departed, he didn't direct attention at anyone.mr. Davidson waited until the door closed. "You okay, offspring?" Jake nodded. He was better than okay. The weight persisted, but it no longer occupied his shoulders alone. Outside, engines continued rumbling. Waiting point 3 weeks later, the Iron Vultures clubhouse appeared nothing like Jake had conceptualized. No dark corners or questionable transactions. Merely a converted garage with mismatched furniture, a coffee-making machine that had witnessed better days, and wall surfaces covered in photographs from decades of journeys. Men who appeared dangerous at first glance played cards, argued about carburetor components, and argued even more loudly about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom facility. Jake had started participating on Saturdays. Initially, he merely occupied a position and observed, uncertain of his placement. But Eric had alternative plans. "Come here," he called out that first morning, waving Jake over to a work surface where a disassembled engine lay in components like a mechanical puzzle. Your paternal figure could rebuild one of these blindfolded. Time you learned why. For hours, Eric walked him through each component: pistons, crankshaft, valves, gaskets. His hands were patient, his explanations clear. When Jake struggled to fit a cylinder head properly, Eric didn't take over control, just adjusted Jake's grip and stated, "Feel that. The metal's communicating to you which way it desires to go." Your father used to say engines communicate if you're willing to listen. The stories came in components between oil changes and loose bolts. A blizzard journey for insulin. A fight between rival club organizations that ended with coffee instead of blood. A paycheck handed over without witnesses, followed by weeks of overtime to make up for it. He never mentioned any of this, Jake stated quietly, wiping grease from a wrench. "That's because Roy didn't execute things for credit," Blaze stated from across the garage where he was rebuilding a transmission. "He executed them because they required doing." One afternoon, Blaze called Jake over and handed him a worn pair of hide riding gloves. "These belonged to your father's first set. He desired you to have them when the time arrived. Guess that's now." Jake inserted them on. They were excessively large, but he didn't care. "You know what the hardest part of traveling is?" Blaze inquired. Jake moved his head negatively, knowing when to lead and when to follow. Your father comprehended that better than anyone. He'd travel out front when someone required protection, fall back when someone required space. That's what made him Big Dog, not the size of his motorcycle or how loud his engine was. It was knowing when to show up and when to step aside. The Roy Miller Memorial Journey launched on a Sunday morning in late spring. Over 300 motorcycles showed up, more than the convoy that had escorted Jake to the educational facility. They traveled a 50-mile loop through the county, ending at a park where veterans' families assembled for a fundraising event. Local businesses donated. The mayor showed up for a photo opportunity, though he avoided the iron vultures directly. Greg Holt's name didn't appear in any coverage. Patrick hadn't returned to the educational facility. Rumor indicated they'd moved to a different district. Jake stood at the registration table, observing riders sign in, reading the dedications they inscribed on the memorial wall surface. "For my brother, who didn't make it homeward. In memory of Staff Sergeant Edgar Webb. For all the ones still fighting battles nobody observes." His father's name appeared more than once that a woman approached. Late 50s, gray hair pulled back, eyes that had witnessed trouble. "You're Roy's offspring." Jake nodded. "Your father saved my offspring's life. Not literally, perhaps, but close enough. Danny came back from Afghanistan with nightmares he couldn't shake. Roy found him at a gas station one evening looking unfortunate. Didn't know Danny from anybody. Just communicated to him for 3 hours. Gave him this number." She held up a card. Iron Vulture's contact information. Told him veterans don't have to fight alone. Danny's doing better now. Works at a motorcycle shop. Got married last year. Her vocalization cracked. "I never got to thank your father, so I'm thanking you." She walked away before Jake could respond. That evening, back at the clubhouse, Jake retrieved the jacket and read the note again. "When you're prepared to travel your personal path." The words felt transformed now, heavier, more real. Eric occupied the position adjacent to him. "You comprehend it now, don't you?" It's not about motorcycles, Jake stated. No, it's about showing up when things get difficult. It's about protecting individuals who can't protect themselves. It's about knowing that some debts aren't paid in currency. They're paid in loyalty, time, and showing up when nobody else will. Eric paused. Your father didn't leave you a motorcycle, Jake. He left you a family, and we're not going anywhere. Jake folded the jacket carefully. Outside, Blaze and Tiny argued about the best route for next month's journey. Crow told a terrible joke that somehow still got laughs. Someone activated music, old rock, the kind his father used to play in the garage. The anger loosened its grip. Something steadier took its placement. The jacket had combusted, but what it represented, honor, brotherhood, sacrifice, had only grown stronger. Those flames hadn't destroyed his father's legacy. They'd revealed it. And as Jake directed attention around the clubhouse at the men who'd shown up for a youth they barely knew, he realized he wasn't just Roy Miller's offspring anymore. He was part of something bigger. Jake folded the jacket and positioned it adjacent to him. Outside, engines fired one by one, just men getting prepared to travel. Blaze laughed at something Tiny stated. Crow missed a gear and cursed loud enough to draw applause. Jake smiled to himself. The road would keep moving. And now, so what Jake's father left him more than jacket. He left him a family. Sometimes respect isn't given, it's earned. And sometimes it's inherited. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story reminded you why brotherhood matters, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to embrace the journey for more stories that stay with you long after they end. See you in our next video.